So the illustration I'm going to give you today is just a simple gospel illustration. Now, a lot of gospel illustrations that you may be familiar with are actually guilt-based. All right? The problem with such things is that guilt-based illustrations mean that the person on the other end actually has to feel guilt for what they've done. The problem is that I've found, at least in my time in certain parts of the United States, is that people don't feel any guilt whatsoever. They come across it and they're like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just fine. But yet, there's something else they deal with, and that's shame. And what ultimately is shame? Shame is the fear that if you actually know who I am, if you actually understand who I am, that you'll reject me. And so the fear is I don't want anyone to know me like that. So I'm going to present a front so that you think you know who I am, but actually you don't. And so what we've found, myself and others who've used this, is that this illustration really does a good job of getting through the shame that people feel. And it really hits into that, whereas guilt-based methods just don't work. And so it's called the gospel versus religion. And the reason it's called that is because as we talk about who Jesus is and what Jesus did, that's very important. But it's also just as important to explain who he isn't. Because oftentimes people will, in their mind, again, we will tell them, hey, this is what Jesus did on the cross, this is what he did for you, but there's still lingering questions in the back of their mind. And yet I found that this illustration does a really good job of not only describing what Jesus did, but also what he didn't do. And it therefore clarifies or focuses the picture even more. And so with that, I want to get into the illustration for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here. I'm going to put God on one end, and I'm going to put me on the other. And I'm going to use myself as part of the illustration. And I'm going to encourage you that if this is something you like, you want to do, that you would do the same as well. Now, the reality is there are things that separate me from God. Now, if you're talking with someone and they don't even really see that there's something that separates them from God, then guess what? This illustration isn't going to do much either. So it does require that someone recognizes that there is something that separates them from God. And so I'm going to describe what separates me from God using these various shapes here. All right? And each one of those things, I'm going to walk through and I'm going to get through things that, are things that I see that do that. To begin with, I've got an A there for anger. Anger is something I've dealt with my entire life. As much as I don't want to think that, I get angry, I still do. It's still a part of who I am. It bothers me that that's the case, but it's there. And granted, it's growing and I'm not as angry about things as I used to be, but it's still something I wrestle over. Throw up a letter P there for pride. Pride is also something I deal with. And I would define pride as passion for self. And humility is passion for God. And if I'm honest, a lot of times I still have a lot of passion for self. I still desire for my name to be known, for people to know who they're interacting with, and what's behind that. It's pride. I want to be known. That's definitely something that's still there. Here in the box, I put an L for lust. It's just another thing that I wrestle with. And I'll probably wrestle with until I'm dead, just like these other things. All right? So lust is an issue. And while there has been growth in that area and good things, it's still there. In the triangle here, I'm going to write a G on there for greed. Why? Because I'm a greedy person. Yes, I love to help people. I love to serve them. Yes, I want to be a giving person. But if I'm honest, I want to give as much to you. I want to give to you after I've taken care of myself. That there still is this desire within me to serve myself. And though I don't like it that it's there, it's there. And finally, in the circle, I'm going to put an S for shame. Now, I know I've already mentioned shame and kind of said this is a shame-based illustration. But again, shame is a part of that. It keeps me from God. Why? Because the fear is if God really knows who I am, he'll reject me. If you look at the account in Genesis chapter 3, whenever God came down into the garden, he couldn't find Adam and Eve. Why? They were hiding. And why were they hiding? They didn't want God to see them. They were afraid that if God actually saw them, he would reject them. And so, within that, these are the things that separate me from God. Now, I'm going to use religion, and to do that, I'm going to represent it with the color blue here. And so what religion says is that I need to work through all of these things. I need to try to find a way to grow, to overcome, to improve. I've got to stretch. I've got to go. I've got to make things happen because I've got to get from here to here. I can't just sit here. No. If I'm going to get in God's presence, I got to do these things. So religion is all about doing. You've got to earn it. And sadly, this is what happens. It's kind of like an obstacle course. Maybe you're familiar with the show American Ninja Warrior. It's kind of like that, where there's this obstacle course, and if you've ever seen it, the contestants struggle to make it through. Maybe they finish, some of them don't. But the reality is that they're struggling and they're fighting through this obstacle course, and that's the way religion is. It's tiresome, it's weary, because I've got to overcome, I've got to do. And so one of the results of religion, there's 4 results. And one of those is depression. Because let's say you're working through that obstacle course. You're working through these things, and yet you see, man, I'm still greedy. I still struggle with pride. I'm still angry. I'm still lustful. You begin to get depressed. You begin to wonder, have I made any progress at all? Over the years, you begin to look back and say, well, maybe there's a little bit. And you just want to throw your hands up in the air and say, I quit. It's over. I don't want to do anymore. And so as a result, depression sets in. What does it matter? And you throw in the towel. Okay? That's one result of religion. And maybe you've experienced that, or you know someone who has. Another, interestingly enough, is pride. Pride comes about when you've actually maybe made some progress here. Maybe you've grown in a lot of ways. Maybe there was something that you were once addicted to that you're now not. And so as a result, you begin to look down on others. Because it's like, well, I've made progress here. I don't know about you, but I've progressed along. And you begin to see this attitude as well in the Pharisees in the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where they begin to look down on the sinners around them because they've made progress. I'm not like one of these people. And so they get prideful. Interestingly enough, that pride, something that we fight to keep us from God, can result from religion, where we're doing things and we've made progress. So those are 2 results that happen. Interestingly enough as well, and tied to pride, it's unforgiveness. This shows up in religion as well. Because you've made progress in things, you've done stuff, but other people haven't. And you maybe you've made it past lust in ways. You've grown tremendously, but this other person hasn't. And so it makes it harder for you to forgive. Or you don't forgive at all. Because you're like, I did it, you need to. And so that's a result of religion. And then finally, what motivates all of this? It's duty. Why am I working through all of this stuff? Because I want to get to God. It's on me. I've got to do it. I've got to earn His love. I've got to show Him where I'm capable. I've got to show Him what I have to offer. So it's do. Sadly, you see this represented in different types of other faiths, right? Where the idea is maybe my good karma has to outweigh my bad. My good works have to outweigh my bad works. You see this show up in the Latter-day Saints in 2 Nephi 25:23 in the Book of Mormon. For it's by grace that you've been saved after all that you can do. Some have said that I do my best and Jesus does the rest. That's not good news. What is motivating that? It's all out of duty. I've got to do my best. And then Jesus will cover it. I've got to earn God's favor. Well, guess what, folks? That's what religion is. That's not the good news. That's not the gospel. So then, what is the gospel? Well, Jesus sees me. He sees me in all my filth. He knows all these things about me. There's nothing that He doesn't understand about me. And so what He does is He grabs me and He moves me positionally next to God. And that's represented here by the green line. And we see this as well in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 to 10. where Paul talks about that positionally, Jesus knew us. He took us in our transgressions and sins. He knew all of our shame. He knew all the filth about us. He knew all of my junk. And he says, you know what? I love you anyway. And I'm going to take you, if you believe in me, you've got to trust that I can do this. But I'm going to take you and I'm going to move you and put you right next to God. And he talks about that here in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 to 10. So that now, whenever God sees me, see now God's looking back at me, he doesn't see all this stuff. What does he see? Instead, he sees Jesus. He doesn't see all my filth. It's gone. What does Ephesians 2, 8 through 9 say? For it's by grace that you've been saved through faith. It's not of yourself. It is a gift of God, not by work, so that no one can boast. Because we would. Again, the pride aspect over here. I've made progress. What about you? Okay? It's a gift, not by works, so that no one can boast. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. And that's what Paul is trying to convey there. And so now when God looks upon me, he sits here and he says, you know what? I don't see all your junk. I just see you. And so as a result, there are 4 things that we see over on this side, just as we did on the religion side. The first of those, instead of depression, there is joy. Why? Again, in religion, I got depressed. Why? Because I got to work through all this stuff. I have to do. And yet, what makes the gospel, what makes it good news, is that God says, you know what? You don't have to work through it. I did it. I paid it all. And so, joy is the number one deal that you see there. Now I'm happy. Because now it's done. It's over. The second result, instead of pride, there is humility. Why is that? Because Jesus paid it all. Now instead of having passion for me, look at what I've done. I have passion for Jesus. Because look at what he did. Look at all the things that he did to make me right with God. It wasn't on me. I never could do it. And so I have this love for him. I have this great depth of love for him and appreciation. And so I too want to serve him. I have that humility. I have that passion for God. So we already are seeing the contrast. Instead of depression, there's joy. Instead of pride, there's humility. Well, also, instead of unforgiveness, what's there? Forgiveness. Why do I forgive? Because I see how much I've been forgiven. I know how much stuff I didn't work through. So how can I not forgive someone else? As a broken, sinful person, if a perfect God can forgive me, how can I not forgive them? And so that's another result of the good news of Jesus. We can now be forgiving people because he forgave us. And then fourthly, instead of being motivated by duty, what motivates me? Love. I don't have to, do these things. I don't have to earn God's favor. Instead, why do I seek to grow? Why do I seek to mature? Because you know what? Look at what he did for me. And so that's the interesting thing is, God sees all of our junk. He sees all of our filth. And yet he says, you know what? I don't see that anymore because all I see is my son. I see his perfection. Once we accept him, he no longer sees this. All he sees is Jesus. But then once we're positionally here, it's not like God turns a blind eye to that and says, who cares? No, he says, you know what I'm going to do? You're positionally here. You're perfect in my eyes. But I'm going to work backwards through this. And I'm going to grow these things. I'm going to change you because I designed you. I know what I designed you to be. And so this is what it talks about in Ephesians 2:10, that we are his workmanship, that we are designed to do good works. We're designed to be like him. And this is the process of sanctification, where for the rest of our life, God is continually working through our lives through the Holy Spirit. As the Holy Spirit is helping me grow, not to struggle with anger as much as I used to. That where my pride maybe becomes not as much of an issue. I don't worry about shame. Why? Because I know I'm fully accepted. That's sanctification. And that's what we see here again. I'm not motivated to work through this out of duty. No. I'm motivated to work through it out of love. I do it because I love him. All right? I don't feel a requirement. It just comes out of me. And so with that in mind, that's an illustration of what Jesus actually did on the cross. And so that's why we call it, and that's why I call it the idea of the gospel versus religion. That, again, religion, I've got to work through these things to earn God's favor. The good news of Jesus says you never can do that. That Jesus grabs you. If you believe in him, he grabs you and puts you positionally next to God. And that all your sin, all your shame, all the things you're worried about, the things that separate you, they're gone. And now you're perfect in his eyes. I thank you for listening to this, and hopefully it'll prove as helpful to you as it has been to me. Take care.